I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Well, it's a long, long journey to the capital city. It's a long, long wait while I'm sitting in committee. But I know I'll be a law someday. At least I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.
Good morning, Bucknutters. It is Tuesday, November 10th, 2015. I am Dan Rubin. This is the Bucknuts Morning 5 and Change. Normally joined on Tuesdays by Dwayne Long, who is on the IR today, filling in admirably and requiring a much bigger stipend, Bill Kurelic, the Dean of Midwest Recruiting. Bill, how are you this fine morning?
Very well, Dan. Glad to be here, and let's roll.
As always, Bill is the guru when it comes to recruiting, so we're going to kind of go over what we know and put some detail on some stuff. Bill, I guess the guy who's been most talked about recently, very interesting recruit, Daelin Hayes, the number 2 rated player in the state of Michigan, one-time commitment to USC in the Sarkeesian Booze Fest, has left that commitment now. Now he's apparently deciding between Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Michigan State. He was at Ohio State this past weekend. If you could bring us up to speed on Daelin, maybe a little bit of an explanation of what type of player he is, where maybe Ohio State projects him, how his visit went at Ohio State, and then it does sound like he's very interested in Michigan State, which is where he will be visiting next.
Yeah, you know, if you would have asked me a couple weeks ago about Daelin Hayes, in fact, I crystal balled him to Notre Dame at that point. You know, seemed like a pretty much a done deal that after he opted out at USC and then he made the official visit to Notre Dame, that was where he was going to end up. But lo and behold, Ohio State is right there. I mean, I don't think, all things considered, his official visit to Ohio State could have gone much better. I mean, it was a home run for Ohio State. You knew he wasn't going to commit because he had other visits scheduled, most notably Michigan State this weekend, as you mentioned, Dan. But, he came away so impressed with Urban Meyer in particular, but he has a great relationship with Tony Alford. You know, you ask where he's going to play. He sees the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, as a Sam linebacker at Ohio State. But they told him, we're recruiting you as a Sam linebacker, but that doesn't preclude playing something else if that's what it takes, and we need you there on the field. So defensive end, as a rush defensive end, that's not out of the question. He's just an outstanding prospect with the only question mark, he hasn't been able to stay healthy. He's 6'4", 238 pounds, and runs well. If he can just stay healthy, he's going to be an outstanding player at the college level. And the talent is absolutely there, and it's going to come down to one of 3 schools. It's going to come down to Ohio State, Michigan State, or Notre Dame. Right now, it's just too close to call. This visit to Michigan State this coming weekend certainly will be very important, and Notre Dame is making their pitch still. So, we'll see what happens. But he's somebody that's very much in the Buckeyes' target sights.
And so it's fair to say for the Buckeyes, he's a take no matter what.
Oh yeah. They definitely want him, and I guess the good thing is that he's going to decide in early December, so they're not going to have to wait. He's an early graduate. They're not going to have to wait, but if they can get him, they're going to take him, no question.
So, Bill, just to kind of reiterate here, he's already visited Ohio State. He's been quoted as saying he doesn't need to go back to Notre Dame, and then his visit to Michigan State is really the last of his, go-tos. So we're pretty much going to know on the inside, you'd think, after this weekend, whether Ohio State's still got a really good shot.
Yeah, but I think he's going to he's not going to put it out there, and I don't think anybody's going to be 100% sure until at least early December. I think he'll think things through, and he's got Oregon and LSU visits scheduled, but I don't think that there are many people that think he's going to end up at anywhere but Ohio State, Michigan State, or Notre Dame. I think he'll take, after the Michigan State visit, I think he'll take some time and think things through on all 3 schools and then come up with a decision. And, he mentioned that he doesn't need to go back to Notre Dame. He's seen what he needs to see there, but that doesn't mean Notre Dame's going to stop trying. You know, they want to get him on campus again for their banquet weekend. That would be an unofficial visit, of course. That would be December 11th. They want to get him on campus again for that banquet and all. And right now, he doesn't plan to do it, but they're not going to stop trying. And certainly, if you're an Ohio State fan, you don't want him to go back there.
As you look at the calendar here, the recruiting calendar, obviously Buckeyes on the road this week at Illinois. They come back for Michigan State, which, yes, the luster has been taken off a little bit because it's not going to be a battle of undefeateds. But I get the feeling that Ohio State has been targeting this weekend from a recruiting standpoint for quite some time. Can you give us kind of an early snapshot of what we expect to be a major recruiting weekend?
Well, you mentioned that the luster's off a little bit with the Michigan State loss, and that also the luster is a little bit off as far as recruiting goes in that we've found out that it's not going to be a night game. Those night games always make it a little nicer, and Urban loves those for recruiting purposes. So the fact that it is not going to be a night game, that takes a little bit off of it too. But what doesn't change is that how many great prospects are scheduled to be at Ohio State that weekend. And certainly if, I don't necessarily expect any immediate commitments because so many of the prospects are guys that aren't going to just show up all of a sudden say they're a commitment and tell the local newspaper or someone like myself, yep, I've committed, and go ahead and write the story. That's, for the most part, those aren't the type of prospects that are going to be there. But still, you've got this may be a segue into your next question, perhaps, Dan, but you've got two great defensive tackles coming in. Antoine Jackson and Dexter Lawrence are scheduled to make official visits to Ohio State that weekend. And as we all know, if there's one thing people want to talk about with Ohio State recruiting right now, it's defensive tackle recruiting. So those two will be there, and they kind of lead the charge as far as the guys making official visits. But you've also got Brandon Burton and Nigel Warrior, two great defensive backs, and Demetrius Robertson, who Ohio State's recruiting as a defensive back, athlete out of Georgia. Those three are scheduled to make official visits. You look at the prospects that for the 2017 class that are going to be on hand or say they're going to be on hand. Jalen Harris, the wide receiver from up in Cleveland, is going to be there, and Ambry Thomas plans to make it back to Ohio State, the outstanding defensive back for the class of 2017 from Michigan, who was just at Ohio State this past weekend. He says he'll make it back, providing he can work around. It works out around his schedule for the playoffs and all that. Jeffrey Okuda out of Texas. So Lamont Wade out of Pennsylvania. The list kind of goes on and on. It will be a huge weekend for Ohio State.
Speaking of which, I want to get a little bit of update on the defensive back recruiting. Are you with the masses that feels Damar Hamlin, the ship may have already sailed?
I don't think the ship has totally sailed, but I would not. If I were going to crystal ball him, it certainly would not be to Ohio State right now. I think Ohio State is still going to do everything they can, but I don't think it's, at one time I thought there was a pretty decent chance that he could end up at Ohio State. I don't feel that anymore. Pitt is kind of the in choice for Damar, but I'm not sure that he really feels that's a big enough stage for him. He may go there anyway, and I think if I had to pick right now, I would go with Pitt. But the thing that kind of keeps me from thinking, yeah, he will actually end up at Pitt is that, again, I'm not sure that's the big stage that he wants to be on. And that's not a slam against Pitt. It's just that, Pitt is not quite what maybe Notre Dame or Ohio State is, for instance, right now, football-wise. So we'll see. But, again, I don't feel particularly positive at this point in regards to him being a Buckeye, no.
In that vein, probably the other guy we've discussed equally as much, Jordan Fuller out of New Jersey. What's your most recent vibe?
Hard to say where he's going. I think Ohio State still has a decent, really just about as good a chance as anybody. maybe 2 months ago, I felt a little bit better. I felt that I'd probably put the odds at least 55% that he would be a Buckeye a few months ago. I think now, though, that the race has tightened. I think certainly you've got to worry about Michigan with him because of how well Michigan is doing recruiting the state of New Jersey. And he still has Michigan as one of his top choices. I think you've got to look at that. But, he's got kind of a solid group of schools that he has been considering. And Ohio State is certainly one of those schools, along with Michigan, as I mentioned, Penn State, Notre Dame, TCU's in there, UCLA, Rutgers, Virginia Tech. All those schools have throughout the recruiting process have pretty well been his choices, and he's kept things pretty close to the vest as to who might have the edge. So I don't really feel comfortable saying I think he's going to end up at this school or that school right now. But I certainly do think Ohio State has a legitimate chance at landing Jordan Fuller.
Those might be a tough question, but as you look at the stretch run, obviously the name can't be shared, but if there was a surprise position you think Ohio State will take a guy at between now and the end, between now and signing day, where do you think that would be?
Well, it seems like we've talked so long about defensive tackle, and that certainly that would not be it. It's been known for a long time that Ohio State wants at least 2 more great defensive backs in the class, so that certainly wouldn't be it. Wide receiver, we know they want Benjamin Victor out of Florida, and they would love to have a guy like Sam Bruce or Nate Krigmeyer or someone like that. So certainly that wouldn't be. So if I had to pick a position that not really many people are talking about, it would be either linebacker or offensive line, and probably offensive line, because we certainly have talked about that they would like to get another linebacker in this class, and with everything going on with Daelin Hayes, that's come to the forefront, getting another linebacker. But not much has been said about offensive line, and they've been, I guess, maybe a little bit quietly going around and talking to some of the top offensive linemen in the country to see if they could get one of them in. I had done a story not too long ago that Gene DeLance from Texas could make an official visit to Ohio State. So I think I would go with offensive line as maybe the surprise position for another prospect in this class.
Okay, I'm going to go on record here, Bill. I believe there'll be at least 1 or 2 surprises here down the stretch. I think there's going to be 2 or 3 guys in this class that we're not even discussing as much down the stretch. That's just me. You don't have to go on record with that, obviously.
Well, I was going to say, too, that the coaching changes I don't think are finished. What happens at Georgia with Rick? And there's other jobs that could come open. And as we know how Urban does on the flip front. And as other jobs come open, this staff certainly won't hesitate to contact those players. And, who knows with Minnesota? The only way Carter Coughlin is going to flip from Minnesota is if there's an entire coaching staff change there. In other words, not only the head coach is or I should say the interim coach at this point, doesn't get the job, but the entire staff changes. Anything less than that, and Carter Coughlin's going to stay with Minnesota. But, hey, who says that entire staff may not change? So perhaps, he comes into play. If Daelin Hayes is in the class by then, it won't matter, but you never know. So I think, you look at the coaching changes that could happen still, and certainly that could be fertile ground for somebody that we aren't even talking about right now to become a Buckeye.
And you can rest assured that the staff knows exactly who those people are and who they want. Bill, before we sign off, this is a big day in the infirmary. One of the most highly publicized recruits and a legacy getting some surgery today. Bring us up to date maybe on Nick Bosa.
Yeah, Nick is going to have his surgery today, and as I put on Bucknuts late last night, he's ready to get this thing moving. He tweeted last night that, as he put it, he starts the road to recovery today. That's what he's looking at it as. His surgery is the starting point for his recovery. He will have surgery today. Going into the surgery, I'm told that everyone involved completely feels that it's going to be 100% recovery, that he will be as good as new, but that the time as of going into the surgery will probably be a 9 to 10 month recovery. So it's going to take a little while. You hope that gets him back in time for fall camp. There's no guarantees at this point, but you hope it gets him back in time for fall camp. And knowing the Bosa family, if there's one thing I think we can all bank on, is that Nick Bosa is going to attack that recovery and rehab and all as ferociously as anybody can attack it. And with that in mind, I think that I wouldn't be surprised if he comes back sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I don't get the impression that Nick Bosa has racked up his freshman year to a red shirt by any stretch. That's fair to say?
I think that's very fair to say.
There he is, people. You cannot get better coverage than this. He is the dean of Ohio State recruiting for a reason. Bill, thanks for joining us on such short notice today, brother.
All right. Have a great day, Dan, and all Bucknutters out there.